Howdy, my name is David Erwin, and this is my presentation over political violence and terrorism within the supply chain. Terrorism has always been a fascinating topic to me. Even though I was 3 when 9/11 happened, I still remember that day. I remember coming home and watching it over and over again on this little white TV we had in the kitchen. Then for many years after, I would ask my parents if the bad guys responsible had been caught yet. I remember being at an Astros baseball game the night that Osama bin Laden was killed on May 2nd, 2011. I remember the entire crowd erupting. People were crying. Cheers and chants of USA, USA rang out through the ballpark. That night, I felt the most patriotic I have ever felt in my life. But it was a weird feeling, because as a Christian, it is wrong to kill, but this man was truly evil. So I was happy, but also conflicted. In high school, I took terrorism and political violence class, and I have never enjoyed a class more in my academic career. The teacher of that class was ex-FBI and my tennis coach. I still keep in touch with him today, and he is the ticket into that career in the future when I graduate. It is what I want to do with my life. I want to have a career that allows me to protect this country and the great citizens of America from the harm of terrorists. I also live in fear recently because of a terrorist attack. I spent a year abroad in Australia, and during that time traveled many times to the beautiful country of New Zealand. On March 15th, 2019, I was in Ashburton, New Zealand, which is just south of Christchurch, when Britton Tarrant, a 28-year-old man from Grafton, New South Wales, Australia, carried out 2 consecutive mass shootings at mosques in Christchurch. He killed 51 people and injured 40 more. The most sickening part of the attack, he broadcast his actions live on Facebook. I remember living in fear for the next few days. We didn't know if there would be more attacks or retaliation from the victimized group. It was the scariest few days I've ever been a part of. My fascination by the subject and want to pursue a career in stopping heinous acts like those previously mentioned were direct influences in my topic selection for this paper. Those attacks accomplished all 3 goals of terrorists. First, their actions involved violence or the threat of it. Second, their motives were political and their target was linked to a broader cause or ideology. Third, and finally, the terrorists strive to have far-reaching psychological repercussions beyond the immediate target or victim. It worked. I feared for my life. Everybody I was with was terrified to go outside and do normal human things for days after. Moving on to talk about terrorism's impact on companies that buy and sell goods. We must look at 2 threats. The first is the actual act of terrorism, and the second is the perceived risk of such an attack. There are immediate losses from a terrorist attack, including the devastating loss of life, destruction of transportation vehicles, and leveling of infrastructure. Whether it be short-term and intermediate costs through higher priced goods or long-term costs of negative reputation of the company that was involved. Moving on to the perceived risk of an attack, companies will take out insurance policies on goods in transit as well as their infrastructure around the globe to protect themselves from the financial burden of a terrorist attack. Companies have to be careful with who they go into business ventures with, as trust in those companies' security protocols as well as the country in which that company resides are important. Let's now take a deeper dive into certain aspects of the supply chain that are directly impacted as a result of a terrorist attack. The technology exists today to know where every piece of product is at any moment, who is driving or flying that product, who has been in contact with the product, where it is going, and even a live feed to physically see the product in question. These technologies must be utilized to minimize the impact of terrorist attacks on the supply chain. A big part of our textbook with regards to supply chain security and terrorism deals with the CTPAT, or Customs Trade Partnership Against Terrorism. This partnership is the basis for the standard of security of goods around the globe. It pushes for best practices to be used industry-wide so the defenses of all industry players are as strong as they can be. Key benefit to companies that comply and are in good standing with CTPAT is the priority access declaration of goods coming into the U.S. in the event a terrorist attack closes a port or airport. However, if terrorists want to wreak havoc on supply chains, all they really need to do is hijack pharmaceutical products for a short period of time and then abandon them somewhere. Per FDA guidelines, these products must be recalled and destroyed. This costs companies millions. Finally, let's talk state-sponsored terrorism. State-sponsored terrorist attacks are carried out by countries against other countries or sometimes businesses within that very same country. Events like hijackings, bombings, and sabotage operations have crippled international companies in countries around the world. These countries are usually not considered hostile either. International companies, must be on alert at all times with who they are exporting to, creating licensing agreements and forming strategic alliances with, or investing in greenfield ventures in. Aside from terrorism, countries can also conduct acts of political violence to control their supply lines. They can bribe or kidnap officials, rig elections, and set up puppet regimes so the businesses that matter are kept under the right person's control. Free trade is not free. It comes at a cost, and the risk of terrorism blowing up global supply chains exists. Future terrorists will target supply chains at an alarming rate over the next 10 years. The solutions outlined in this presentation must be put into action today.